are excited to have you join us tonight for information regarding the Virginia Department of Aging and Rehabilitative Services, also known as Virginia DARS. Before I turn the program over to Mrs. Sharon Willis, Transition Specialist for Chesapeake Public Schools, I want to remind parents to place all of their questions in the Q&A box located at the bottom of the screen. We have disabled the chat feature, so you're only able to communicate to us through the Q&A box. Also, this webinar is recorded and will be placed on our YouTube channel within the next few days. At this time, I'd like to turn the program over to Sharon. Welcome, Sharon.
Thank you, Lisa. Good evening. My name is Sharon Willis. I'm the Transition Specialist for Chesapeake Public Schools. I would like to thank you for attending the Transition Planning for Students with Disabilities Preparing for Life After High School. The Department of Aging and Rehabilitative Services, known as DARS. The mission of DARS is to improve the employment, quality of life, security, and independence of older Virginians with disability, and their families. Presenting on behalf of the Portsmouth DARS office is Mr. Matt Olson. The Portsmouth office services Portsmouth, Suffolk, Chesapeake, and Franklin. The Portsmouth field office staff provides services to help Virginians with disabilities prepare for, secure, retain, and regain employment and become more independent and self-sufficient. Mr. Olson has worked for DARS for over 14 years as a vocational rehabilitation counselor, pre-employment transition services counselor, and currently is the manager of the Portsmouth office. Mr. Olson has years of experience and a wealth of knowledge to share with us this evening. Without further ado, I'd like to present Mr. Matt Olson.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm going to share my screen real quick here so you guys can see. Wait. All right. All right. All right. Can I get can everybody see that? Can I get like a thumbs up or a yes, or everybody can see it?
We can see it.
Okay, thank you. All right. Well, again, good evening. My name is Matt Olson. I am the manager of the Portsmouth DARS office. Like Miss Willis said, we cover Portsmouth, Chesapeake, Suffolk, and then we also have an office in Franklin. I'm excited to be here tonight to talk to you guys a little bit about some of our services. Chesapeake holds a dear place in my heart because when I started as a transition counselor, they were the first school system I worked with and the only school system I've worked with through my transition years. So I'm always happy to come back and present with them, and when they invite me to come back, and they keep inviting me, so I guess that's good. But I'm excited to be here and kind of talk to you guys a little bit about, you know, our services and our programs, and hopefully answer any questions that you guys have. All right. So with the Department of Rehab Services, what we did in the last couple of years is we split our program into kind of two sections. So we now have pre-employment transition services, and then we also have voc rehab. So for this presentation, you want to look at it as pre-S is transition, VR is adults. So VR is when we start to get towards adulthood, after high school, getting ready to exit high school. So kind of that's how a good way to kind of separate them. I'll be talking about both programs, but what I'm going to talk about first is what's called our pre-S program. So this pre-S services are services that are provided to students 14 to 22 that are in high school that have an eligible for an IEP or a 504 plan and who are enrolled in high school, post-secondary, all the way up to the age of 22. What we do is, so we have counselors that go into each school. So there's counselors that are designated to each Chesapeake Public School high school. And they go in once a month and they work with students in groups and they work with them on these 5 areas that I'm going to go through here. So the 5 areas of PRES are job exploration, work-based learning, counseling on post-secondary education and training, workplace readiness, and self-advocacy. Now, note too, not a student doesn't have to go through all 5 of these areas, because obviously there might be some areas that don't meet the students' needs. So some students may not need that post-secondary if they're not looking at like going to college, or they might. So it's not that every student has to get all 5 areas. These are just the 5 areas that are offered through PRES services. And again, this is when the counselors come into the school every month. When they're doing groups with the students, they're focusing on these 5 areas. So job exploration, of course, that's when you're kind of get the students to kind of explore different jobs. So sometimes that involves doing like some interest inventories, or just sitting down and doing a little interview with them, or just doing a session on just different kinds of careers and things like that. So just anything that where we're exploring jobs would fall under job exploration. This is typically the area that we spend a lot of time on, because typically, especially with the younger students that are maybe freshmen and sophomores, they're going to get more exposed to this area because we're just kind of learning about work at that point, introducing them to work. And so a lot of times job exploration, you'll see mostly a lot of the younger ones, but also some of the older ones that maybe don't have an idea what they want to do, or they're just not quite sure. And then just some examples, interest inventories. We might do some labor market surveys, career pathways, like talking to them about, programs that you can maybe do at a tech school, like welding, IT, computer technology. We have sometimes too had, in the summer times, we sometimes had speakers come and speak to the students, like an employer or someone that, some certain kind of job, or an organization. So sometimes we offer, we do some career speakers as well. All right. So work-based learning, this one is more out in the community. So this one doesn't exactly take place in the school system. This area here, this one we've mostly focused on in the summertime, because what this one involves students actually going out into the community and getting a chance to explore different careers. So like they might go on job tours, they might go on informational interviews, they might do some job shadowing. So a lot of these things take place outside of the school. And so a lot of the work-based learning experiences we do with students in the summer. Like for example, this summer, we're doing some drone academies with TCC. We're doing a summer pre-S camp with a company called Bloom Consultant. They do like, and then also most of the work-based learning experiences are done with a job coach. So basically DARS contracts out to a job coach organization, and then they do the work-based learning with the students out in the community. They can be done in groups. Sometimes they're done on an individual basis because they can spread out a little bit more. We're not able to do as much one-on-one stuff in the schools just because of the amount of students that we see in the groups and the time that we have to go in there. But work-based learning can be a little bit more individualized because job coaches are doing it, and there's a little bit more wiggle room for them to do stuff. So they try to do it in groups, but it can also be done one-on-one depending on the student and the situation. And again, just some more examples. Even like sometimes we can even do like volunteering. Sometimes we can do paid internships. Sometimes if we can find an employer that's willing to do it or that wants to do that. Sometimes we do non-paid internships. But it's really just a chance for students to get out in the community and explore work and what it's like to have a job, and and get a chance to shadow people and interview people that maybe do a job that they want to do someday. So it's really good, hands-on experience. This is one that's more hands-on that students can do. All right, so post-secondary opportunities. Again, this is talking to students about training options after high school. So whether it's, community college or a trade school or Wilson Rehab Center that we sometimes send students. So this is just kind of helping them with kind of understanding their accommodations in college. And, we always say, there's no IEPs in college, but it's trying to help them understand what that looks like in college, where, how to ask for that help, how to self-advocate. Sometimes I know in the past I've done college tours with students where we went on a college tour together to kind of see what it's like. So kind of anything in this category is kind of more towards students who want to further their education after high school. Some of these can be done in the high school, but a lot of these are also done, depending on what it is, can be done out in the community or, outside of the school as well. And again, just some examples, financial aid options. We sometimes talk to them about financial aid, trying to, set them up with information on if there's any job, like, college fairs, college tours, like I talked about. And then we also talk to them about the admissions requirement. And sometimes, a lot of times in this category too, we give the students homework. They need, we help them look up the information, because really at the end of the day, with all of our programs, it's about independence. At the end of the day, we want the student to be independent. That's our main goal, because eventually DARS will fade out of the picture and that client needs to be, would be able to work on their own with minimal support. So we're trying to get them to that point. And so that's really the biggest goal, is independence, trying to get them more independent and ready for after what high school holds. Again, workplace readiness training. This is another one that just it's kind of about just teaching them some different skills that are linked to employment. So like showing up on time, hygiene, how to clock in. This can even be stuff like resumes, job applications, just kind of anything that's going to make them more ready for work is kind of covered in this category. So it's a little bit more extensive things. Like once we've kind of identified maybe some goals, now it's time to start kind of figuring out, and a lot of these categories too, keep in mind, can be done at the same time. So like, for example, someone could go out in the community and do work-based learning, but while they're out doing like a job shadowing experience, they're also kind of doing some workplace readiness training, because they're getting to observe how people work on the job. And so some of these categories kind of tie into each other. So that, which is kind of nice, they kind of overlap sometimes. So just some examples: training soft skills, job seeking skills, independent living skills. I talked about some of this: good hygiene, transportation. We do help, students with transportation. I know transportation is something that in Hampton Roads can be a huge problem. So we do work with students on teaching them to use other forms of transportation, how they're going to get to work. So transportation is a big piece of that. That could even include like bus training. If someone was approved to like ride Handy Ride, we could train them on how to use the bus system to get to work. So that would be another thing that would be kind of under workplace readiness training. And then last but not least, self-advocacy. This is a big one. This one's covered in all the areas. I think self-advocacy for me is the biggest one, because I think, at the end of the day, like I said, the clients, the students have to go to work every day and work the job every day. We don't have to go for them. So that self-advocacy is really important, because they're going to have to be able to, advocate for themselves when maybe if they're working with a job coach, their job coach is not there, or their DARS counselor isn't in the picture. So really, self-advocacy, we try to cover in everything. I know when I go into the schools, because right now, currently, I still go into Grassfield and Deep Creek because I'm still covering a caseload. So I know, like, when I go into my two Chesapeake schools, I try to really emphasize the self-advocacy and work and try to tie that into every lesson, because I think that's really important, especially after high school, especially when it comes to like your disability and how to talk to employers about it, what you can talk about, what you shouldn't talk about. Accommodations, a lot of people need accommodations on a job. How do you talk to your employer about that? So I really think that this self-advocacy one is just very important, because it really is the big basis of what we do and what we're trying to get the students to accomplish as an end goal. So I think there's, like I said, different things like accepting feedback, setting goals, problem solving, all those important skills that someone needs to, be successful. All right. So this is just kind of a little bit, this kind of explains the difference. Like I said, a lot of times I think people get kind of confused because we did divide the program out into 2 sections. So again, pre-S services are anything that happens during high school. And again, I say college because you can be 18, be in college and still get pre-S services because you're under 22. So it doesn't just have to be high school. If somebody goes to college and they're under 22, they could still get some of these services. It's just after 22, pre-S services stop. Or if you exit school and don't go to like if you exit high school and don't go to college or a tech school, pre-S would end for you at that point as well. So again, pre-S is kind of pre-employment. So this is working on students on getting them ready for employment. So everything under pre-S is going to be getting them ready for employment. We're not putting them into employment yet. We're getting them ready, giving them the skills that they need to be successful at work. All right. So then once a person is getting ready to exit high school or is on the, getting close to exiting high school, and we feel like they're going to need maybe some additional support as an adult, then what we would do is we would transition the student to what are adult services, which is vocational rehab services. Now, the last thing I'm going to say about pre-S is, so pre-S services are free to families. So pre-S services is, again, for any student with a disability who's eligible for an IEP or 504 that's 14 to 22 in high school. Any student with a disability, that's pre-S. So anybody can do pre-S services. When we get into vocational rehab, which I'm going to talk a little bit about our adult services, the process is completely different. It's not the same. And if students are working with DARS on pre-S, it's not guaranteed that they're moved to vocational rehab services, adult services. Because I know a lot of times I'll get parents will say to me, oh, my student worked with the DARS counselor when they were in high school, but then they exited high school and then they're not working with them anymore. And usually it's because they didn't connect with the voc rehab side of things and get on to more of our adult services. We don't automatically move students over to VR because not every pre-S student needs VR, and not every, because not every pre-S student needs that additional support that I'm going to talk about here in a minute. So I just want everybody to keep that in mind. If you've done pre-S services and you are looking to go into when they're getting ready to graduate and you want to move over to VR, that is a separate process that you have to apply for. We don't just move people's cases over. All right. So all right. So vocational rehab services, again, I kind of call these more of our adult services because these are services when the students are ready to start looking for a job. So when someone gets moved into VR, we're kind of getting ready. The end goal is now finding them a job. So they're what we call job ready almost. They're getting ready to move into that phase where we need to figure out what happens next. So again, this is where employment is really important. If students are signed up for VR services, that means that they are committing that they want to get a job and work in competitive employment. So competitive employment is basically where you're working in a place where there's people with or without disabilities. So places like Walmart, Target, Food Lion, with minimal to little support. So these are kind of, again, if someone's looking to do voc rehab, this is when they want to work like this. The whole end goal of this program is the job, the competitive employment. So some of the things we do under the VR program is, this is where we do a lot more of the vocational counseling. We'll do some different evaluations with the students to kind of get some ideas of what they want to do. A vocational evaluation is where a student sits down with an evaluator. They give them some different academic testing, some different hands-on tasks. And then based on the skills, they match those skills up with different jobs that the client could do. So a lot of times we do voc evals for students who maybe aren't sure what they want to do, or students that have a concrete goal, but we want to make sure that it's an appropriate goal. And then also, if a student's interested in going to college, we do a voc eval because we have to do that to make sure that college is an appropriate choice before we dive more into that. All right. And then again, doing some more career development. When a person's on a VR case at our adult services, they're meeting with their counselor. This is more of a one-on-one service. So they're meeting with their counselor one-on-one. Like either in the office, out in the community. These are more things that don't happen in the school system. This is all I look at this as kind of after school's out or school's getting ready to be, they're getting ready to be out of school. So a lot of this stuff happens out in the community. And this is more when you meet with your counselors more one-on-one for this part. Also, sometimes we'll do some situational assessments with a client. A situational assessment is where a client goes out in the community to a job site and they'll do the same job that, like, let's say, for example, they'll go to Kroger and bag groceries. So they'll bag groceries right along with all the other workers that work there. The difference is they're being assessed by a job coach and the job coach is using that assessment to gain up some transferable skills to see what their skill set is, what their level of independence is. But they would go like to a job site and work alongside the people that work there. It's just they would be there as doing an assessment. And the employer would know that they were there with the job coach doing an assessment. And then supported employment is working with a job coach. So sometimes we have clients that need a little bit more support with looking for a job. So we'll refer them to a job coach, which again, we vendor out to, and the job coach works with them one-on-one. They kind of help them with applications. They help them with the interview process. They help and then once the client gets the job, they help train them on the job. And like I said earlier, the job coach, that eventually starts to fade out. And then at some point, the job coach is only checking in like once a month, that the client's able to be independent on the job, knowing that the job coach is there when needed, but they're not going to be with them on site every day. And so they do eventually fade out of the picture. How long that takes just depends on the client. It's case by case basis. There's no real set time of when they need to fade out. They just have to be able to fade out, but that time frame is going to be different for everybody and what the job is and how fast they learn it. Some people go into a job, learn it really quick. Some people, it takes a little bit. And again, job coaching is kind of the same thing. That's when the job coach goes out with them. Skills training, higher education. Again, this is kind of more back to the college, tech schools. The Woodrow Wilson Rehab Center. We sometimes send students up there. It's a school in Fishersville, Virginia. It's about 3 hours from here, where a student can go and learn a trade. And then they come back certified in that trade. And then we help them find jobs in the community in that trade. Everybody has a disability at that school, so it's a little bit more supportive because everybody there, you have a disability to go. So it's kind of like giving somebody the college experience, but there's a little bit more support, but they do have to be able to, live up there and potentially be able to live up there for a while, because they would be up there anywhere from like 6 to 9 months doing a training program. So there's still that independence piece. They have to be able to go up there and live, but they would have a little bit more support than a regular college setting. All right. So going back to Pre-S and VR services, if anybody's interested in these services, there's 2 ways you can apply. With a lot of the high school students, we encourage the students to go to their case manager or the transition specialist. And they have the referral forms for DARS. And what they do is they have your students fill it out and then they get them to us, and then we reach out and start that contact. But people can also call our main number on here. And we do referrals right over the phone. So if someone didn't go through the school, or someone maybe graduated from high school and then they decided they wanted DARS later, they could always call our main number, and then we just take their application over the phone. And so this just kind of runs a little bit through our process for vocational rehab services, so our adult program. So the first step is always somebody puts in their application. So someone's referred. And then what happens is the counselor will schedule an intake. They'll sit down with you one-on-one. They're going to ask you a lot of questions about, your medical history, your work history. It's going to be about an hour-long assessment. It's either done in person, virtually, over the phone. Every counselor does it kind of differently. But it's going to just be a lot of information gathering, asking a lot of questions, getting some information. This is where we get releases signed because again, we have to have releases to be able to talk to anybody for our program. So this is the intake is where you get all that stuff signed. Get all, because we do have to request paperwork and documentation. So for our adult program, there's an eligibility piece. So a person has to be eligible for our adult program. And what that eligibility is, you have to have a disability, you have to live in Virginia, and your disability has to cause an impediment to employment. And how we determine that third piece is by medical records. So we'll request, we request records from the school, any doctors that you have, and we use all that information to determine if somebody's eligible for our program. Once the person is eligible, then what we would do is that's when we would sit down and start writing out. So we also have IEPs, but ours stand for Individualized Employment Plan, not educate. So kind of similar wording, but different. But what that is, that's when we sit down and kind of mark out, like the client will be asked to pick a vocational goal. We'll kind of talk about like what kind of services we feel like that student's going to need to reach that goal. Rather, it's like we said, like a voc evaluation. Are they going to need a job coach? Do we need to do some assessments in the community to determine, what their fit is? But all the stuff that we're going to do with that student, that all comes out in what's called the planning meeting. And that's when the counselor's really just sitting down with you again and going over the process, the requirements, what the expectations are for the program, what the expectations are for the student, the client, which are things like, keeping in contact with your counselor, following up with your counselor, following up with, just keeping your counselor in the loop. And I will say during this process, because it's adult services, the counselor is going to want to talk to the student. Because again, the student is in the driving seat in this program. Because again, we're looking for a job for them. So it's kind of their case. So, we obviously, there's different situations with guardianship, power of attorney. That's obviously understandable as well. But what I always tell people is you have to remember is at the end of the day, that client's going to be the one going to work every day. So the client's going to have to be involved in their VR process. If the counselor's always talking to the parent and never talking to the student, it'd be kind of questioning, is this student want to work? And so I really encourage people when they apply for VR that on our adult services that, we do treat it like an adult service. And so we really encourage the students to be involved in their cases and be involved in their planning because they're the ones that have to do it every day, and be successful at it. So we want to make sure that they have the buy-in because, they're going to have to do it every day. So, there will be, so the counselor will always be asking to talk to the client. They're going to want the client on the phone during the meetings. They're going to want the client present during any meetings because, they're going to be the ones making those decisions and helping us figure out where they want to go with work. Oops, sorry. Shoot. Okay. There it goes. Hold on. Sorry. Got ahead of myself. All right. And then, and so again, as far as VR services go, if it's, we help, so we provide services that are based in employment. So it has to be employment driven for us, because we're all about employment. So we have resources for other things, but our main goal is employment. So, anytime you're working with our agency, it's going to be about the job part. For other resources in the community, try to link people to other resources in the community for things that we don't cover. But again, if it's vocationally necessary, typically that's how we determine if it's something that we can help with. For example, transportation. If someone gets a job and they need help with transportation initially before they start getting paid or get a paycheck, that's something we'll help them with because that's vocationally necessary. They need that transportation to get to work. So that's kind of an example of something that's vocationally necessary. They need it to be successful. They need it to get to work. So I would consider that to be something that, that would be vocationally necessary for them to achieve employment. And then the other thing with adult services is because we're a state agency and it is an adult program, there is a financial piece to our VR services. like I said before, anything that's pre-S is free for any student. Our VR program doesn't work the same way. If a student gets SSI or SSDI, then all DARS services are free to them. But if a student doesn't get disability benefits and they're claimed by their parent, then it is based on income driven. Now, that's not saying that there's not services we can't provide for free, but some things that cost money would be things like a job coach, college, obviously, the Wilson Rehab Center, things like that that might cost money. So I always like to tell people up front, we do have a financial P-STAR program. So there could be, it's a little bit different than pre-S because it's, state and federal program. And so it runs on a different system. And like I said, when you do the intake, we kind of talk about, that's kind of the counselor can kind of give you an idea of where you are on that scale, like during the intake. We kind of tell people that up front just before we get to the plan, because then they kind of know when we get ready to write the plan, they kind of know what services, we just want to make sure that people know that up front about payment if they would have to pay for something, because we don't want to get too far into the process and then be like, oh, by the way. So we really do that at intake, try to, talk to families about that, what we can offer that's of no cost. But there is a financial piece to our VR program. All right. So I threw a lot of information at you. I realized that. I am, I'm available for questions today, but also, if they want to share my information, I'm happy to talk to any of you individually after this. I mean, you can call me during the week or email me if you have additional questions, or if there's still something you maybe needed explained a little bit more one-on-one. Please reach out to me. I'm more than happy to answer your questions either in here or outside of here. I'm okay if this PowerPoint gets shared as well. I share this with families and students all the time. This is usually what I give families when they talk about DARS services. But it's a lot of information. But I tried to kind of just break it down in what's high school and what's adult. But again, if anybody has any questions, feel free. But again, also, I can give my contact information to them to get out to everybody that's here tonight. And you guys can feel free to call me or, email me, whatever, if you have additional questions that you don't maybe have here or you want to address later. But I'm going to turn it back over and see about any questions. But I appreciate all of you listening to me, and hopefully I gave you a little bit more information than you had before. Like I said, I know it's a lot, but I just want to make sure I covered the basis so you kind of know what it looks like when you're going into it.
Thank you, Matt. You have shared a wealth of information with us. Does anyone have any questions that they want to put in the Q&A? Well, I have a question, Matt. For pre-ed services, is there a certain age that a student has to be to begin pre-ed services?
They have to be 14. But they have to be in high school. So I know sometimes a 14-year-old's in middle school. And the reason we say high school is because our counselors can only cover high school. Right. We can't, we had to cover all the middle schools we would be. So yeah, they have to be 14. They can start at 14 and they also have to be like a freshman in high school. They can start as early as 14, which is new because it used to be higher. It used to be 16. And now we've lowered it to 14. So really, and like I said, usually with the 14, 15-year-olds, it's that job exploration. We're kind of doing a lot of that beginning stuff. So a lot of them are kind of tie into that job exploration I was talking about, because they're just still trying to figure out work. They're just new to high school. However, I do talk with parents that their students are in 8th grade just to kind of get them ready for that transition next year. So that might be more of like a one-on-one conversation, but I've had I've had people reach out to me where their kid was in 8th grade and we just kind of started preparing them for what was going to happen freshman year. Just kind of had that initial conversation about Prius. We were always happy to do that as well. So.
Thank you, Matt. We do have a few questions. VR services are income-based. Is that based on the individual receiving the services or the parents?
If it's based on the parents, if the parents claim them on their taxes. So if a child is claimed on their parents' taxes and they don't have benefits, I guess that's actually done, then it would be based on parent income. If the child's not filed on the parents' taxes, then it would be based on their income. And if it's 0 or they don't have an income, then they would probably be financially eligible. But yeah, it's based on the parents' income. And that's why they do have to be involved in the process as well, because if they're the ones, they might have to pay for some of those services.
Thank you, Matt.
And then,
Does anyone else have any questions? We have another question, Matt. Who do we send the completed forms to? Does someone then reach out to the parent? I work for Chesapeake Virtual Academy as well.
Okay, yeah. You can send the forms to, if they have a case manager. If they don't have a case manager, you can, like I said, you can call the main number there, or you can even turn referrals into me personally, because I assign all the cases anyway, so they all end up coming to me. But yeah, those are kind of the ways you can do it. I'm not as overly familiar with the virtual academies. I don't know if they have case managers or not. If not, then I would maybe coordinate with the school of their home school, or what school they would be in, or like I said, or you can refer yourself through our agency. There's lots of different ways to get it to us, though. Yeah.
Thank you, Matt. We've had a few questions concerning the transition specialists and a list of the schools that they are assigned, and we'll provide that information when we post the presentation. Normally, there is a question concerning the transition specialist, and what we have 4 transition specialists. Myself, Sharon Willis, I'm assigned to Deep Creek High School and to Grassville High School. We have Regina Stowe, who's assigned to Oscar Smith High School and to Indian River High School. We have Dr. Frankie Dampierre, who's assigned to Great Bridge High School and Hickory High School, and Christina Trinello, who's assigned to Western Branch. Again, we will provide that information. If you have your DARS referral form, you want to forward that to the transition specialist that's assigned to the student's home school. We have another question, Matt. Where can I get more information on Woodrow Wilson Center and the qualifications for entry?
Okay. So WWRC does have a website. If you Google WWRC, it literally pops right up. I always encourage people to go on their website. You can get a lot of great information. You can also set up tours. They do tours just kind of like colleges do. So you can go out for the day and see it, tour it. But yeah, you can get on their website. It gives you all the information about their programs, what their admissions criteria is. I will say, WWRC, you have to be a DARS client to go there. So it is a DARS program. So the student does have to be connected with our agency to go to Wilson. But yeah, I would encourage to get on their website and look at a lot of their information. And then if you sign up for DARS services during your intake, you also get more information about Wilson as well during that process.
Okay, does anyone else have any other questions? Well, again, thank you so much for attending, and I will turn it over to Lisa Carey. I'm not sure if Lisa's having technical difficulty or not. So this will conclude our webinar for this evening. Thank you for attending. As Lisa presented in the beginning, please visit the website or follow Base on Twitter. The presentation will be posted on CPS YouTube channel. Thank you again for attending and have a wonderful evening.